This is BBC World News. I'm Matthew Amroliwala. On today's Global, tactics from the last century as Russia tries to take the town of Soledar in the east of Ukraine. Ukrainian forces desperately defend their territory as relentless Russian shelling obliterates much of this strategically important town.
The whole land near Soledar is covered with the corpses of the invaders and scarred from the strikes. This is what madness looks like.
Heavy fighting too in the nearby city of Bakhmut. Is Russia about to have their first victory on the battlefield for months? Also on today's programme, warnings of floods and high winds as more severe weather has hit parts of California, with a 5-year-old missing after being swept away by the floodwaters. It comes as Europe had its hottest summer on record in 2022 in a year of climate extremes. Inspecting the damage, Brazil's new president visits buildings attacked by supporters of his predecessor, Jair Bolsonaro, who've refused to accept the election result. And we meet the bus driver who loves his job so much, he's written a song about it. Hello and welcome to BBC News. Every month in the war in Ukraine, a new place name is thrown up, unfamiliar to the outside world, but which gives us a snapshot of this conflict. Well, today it is Soledar in the east of the country. Residents talk of virtually every building in the town being damaged or destroyed. President Zelensky has spoken about the area being littered with bodies. This is what madness looks like, he said. Let me show you pictures we've received from a Reuters journalist who we've been talking to. They're from 5 days ago, before Ukrainian forces told them it was too dangerous to stay. By all accounts, Soledar is where the fighting is most fierce, on the front line, relentless artillery and fighting in minus 10 degrees temperatures. It's worth underlining why the fighting is so fierce there. Soledar is close to Bakhmut, the city besieged for months now by Russian forces. Bakhmut is located on a strategic supply line between Donetsk and Luhansk. If Russia takes Soledar and Bakhmut, it opens the way to bigger cities like Kramatorsk and Sloviansk. So, absolutely critical in this war. Let's start this hour with President Zelensky talking about what is happening on the ground.
And what did Russia want to win there? Everything is completely destroyed. There is almost no life left. Thousands of their people are gone. The whole land near Soledar is covered with the corpses of the invaders and scarred from the strikes. This is what madness looks like.
Well, our correspondent Hugo Bechega has the latest for us on this story from Kyiv.
Fighting is intense in the eastern Donetsk region, especially around the town of Soledar. This morning, the British Defence Ministry said Russian forces and mercenaries from the Wagner Group had probably taken control of most of this town. And last night, President Zelensky said the situation was extremely difficult. He said there was almost no life left in Soledar. Now, this is a town near Bakhmut, just miles away from Bakhmut. We've been talking about Bakhmut for quite some time now. This has been a main target for Russian forces in that part of the country. Now, the search continues for 2 British men who went missing on Friday, Christopher Parry and Andrew Bagshaw. They were traveling from the city of Kramatorsk to Soledar. They were doing voluntary work, helping civilians leave that part of the country. And in Brussels, the president of the European Commission said the EU would continue to support Ukraine and extend sanctions against Russia and its allies.
That's the latest from Kyiv. A little earlier on today's Global, I spoke to Clodagh Kilcoyne, a Reuters photojournalist who's been documenting the fighting around Soledar over the last couple of weeks.
We have tried to enter Soledar several times, but each time we go there, we're pushed back. We're told they're not allowed to take people in anymore. We did accompany a humanitarian aid group on the 5th of January, just 5 days ago, and we made it to the outskirts of Soledar. And all you can see are plumes of smoke rising from the city, absolute chaotic sounds of incoming missiles shelling non-stop. And it is just a really, it's a very frightening place at the moment. and residents, anyone who's on the outskirts, are trying to get out at the moment. And that's who we accompanied, an aid evacuation journey of a woman. And on our way outside of Solidar, when we made it onto the main road, we saw a huge column of Ukrainian military vehicles of all shapes and sizes, ready for battle for Solidar. We tried to interview several of them, but they said to us, look, we're facing a very serious battle here. We're not really ready to do an interview. We're not prepared to do an interview. And they said the next few days are going to be very, very serious.
Yes, there are mining tunnels. They are well dug in. President Zelensky talking about the fight and the resistance. But a spokesman for Ukraine's eastern forces talks about Soledar being hit by 86 different strikes from artillery just in the last 24 hours, and went on to say it is not a 21st century war. And certainly your description, even the sounds of what is going on, seems to back that up.
Absolutely. It's non-stop. The shelling is relentless. Even when you're standing on an overlook watching it, it's plumes of smoke and sparks of incoming shells, grads landing. It really is a very hellish scene just looking at it from a distance. I can't even imagine what it's like being on the ground in the actual city itself.
You were the journalist that took pictures from Kramatorsk. Now that story was in the news over the weekend because the Russians claimed a strike there had killed 600 Ukrainian forces. I'm going to put those pictures of the crater on the screen in a moment or two. But tell me what you saw. Did you see any sort of evidence there had been mass casualties?
No, I didn't. The strike landed 10 metres from the building. The building looked empty, it looked derelict, boarded up. It had probably been shelled several times previous, but there was no blood, there was no body parts. It didn't look like it had been occupied for quite some time. And the same with the second location, the vocational school. It landed outside of the building. The building doesn't look like it's being used at the moment. We looked through the windows, we walked all around it, we walked all over the premises, and we didn't see any evidence of blood or body parts or anything that would indicate that there was any mass casualties.
Now, more severe weather has hit parts of California, with a 5-year-old missing after being swept away by the floodwaters as the death toll from a series of storms rises to 14. The boy and his mother were in a truck going to school when the vehicle was overcome by waters. Meanwhile, 10,000 people living in the star-studded coastal town of Montecito near Santa Barbara have been ordered to leave. Warnings about floods and high winds are in place across much of the US state, with more cyclones expected. Aruna Iyengar has the latest.
California is getting used to extreme weather. Here, a rock slide blocks a highway. The state is struggling with torrential downpours and battering winds that have already killed a number of people in 10 days.
It's coming out of the creek over there. It's overflowing the creek and coming in.
Half a foot of water, you're losing control of your vehicle. We're seeing people go around these detours because they don't see any obstacles. They think everything is fine, and putting their lives at risk, or putting first responders' lives at risk.
The whole community of 10,000 people in Montecito in Santa Barbara County have been ordered to evacuate. The area is home to the Duke and Duchess of Sussex and celebrities such as Ellen DeGeneres.
This creek next to our house never flows, ever. It's probably about 9 feet up, and it's going to go another 2 feet up. We have horses ready to evacuate. We need to be nicer to Mother Nature, because Mother Nature is not happy with us.
The torrential rains are the result of an atmospheric river of dense moisture funneled into California from the Pacific, powered by low-pressure systems churning offshore. Across the state, 100,000 people are without electricity, and on Sunday, the President, Joe Biden, declared an emergency, allowing federal assistance for local relief efforts. These hills looked like this in September last year. Now, streets across the state are transformed into gushing rivers. In Santa Clara, the storms bring this section of Highway 101 to a standstill. Pounding surf has battered seaside roads. And in Napa County, famous for its wines, crews clear mud from roads as the River Napa overflows. Further south in Ventura, 18 people are rescued by fire crews after they're stranded on an island by swelling rivers. Elsewhere in the county, there's chaos on the streets.
There's just a lot of infrastructure that isn't designed for drainage because it's Southern California, so no one's expecting it.
No one here can quite believe what they're seeing. Aruna Iyengar, BBC News.
Now, it's believed Europe and the polar regions were the areas hardest hit by severe temperature changes caused by climate change last year. According to new analysis, Europe experienced its warmest summer on record, while some parts of Greenland were up to 8 degrees warmer than average in September. Overall, 2022 was the 5th warmest year on record, which means the last 8 years in a row were each the warmest yet to be measured.
France had a brutal summer. It recorded its hottest ever year and lowest levels of rainfall. The perfect conditions for the wildfires which swept the country, destroying crops and threatening homes. The Gironde region in the south of the country was very badly hit.
I think it's really frightening in terms of having things prepared for an escape if we need to, which again sounds totally crazy when I say it out loud, that, you know, we might need to escape from where we live. But it gives you some sense of security that you are preparing things and that things are there and ready to go if needs be.
It was a similar story across the continent, which experienced its worst drought for 500 years. Some of Europe's mightiest rivers hit record low water levels, including the Danube, the Rhine and the Loire, as the UK, Germany and Spain also experienced record heat waves. This shows average surface temperatures worldwide in 2022. Blue areas are below average, but look at the hotter than average red areas. Europe, particularly Western Europe, is especially hot, as is much of Northern Asia. Wales also recorded its highest ever temperature during a year in which global temperatures were 1.2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. Now, governments have committed to trying to keep global temperature rise to within 1.5 degrees to avoid the worst of global warming. But scientists say time is rapidly running out.
If we look at the current level of emissions and current level of warming, we will hit 1.5 degrees sometime in the early 2030s. So we're already living on borrowed time effectively and borrowed emissions.
The most dramatic warming of all is happening in the coldest places. Temperatures over the centre of Greenland were 8 degrees higher than average in September. Antarctica experienced a record period of intense warmth too. More evidence of how our world is changing. Justin Rolat, BBC News.
Now, still to come on today's programme, hitting the shelves after days of making the headlines. Prince Harry's book goes on sale around the world and is already breaking records.
Chloé, je suis amoureux de toi.
Quoi?
Need help learning and speaking a new language? Try Babbel, the language learning app designed to help you have conversations in any situation.
Error.
Over 150 language experts designed Babbel to be the most effective way to learn a new language.
Je suis heureux. Je suis heureux.
15-minute lessons teach you everyday practical conversations you'll actually use.
Vous faites un beau couple. À votre santé. À votre santé.
Backed by science, Babbel uses the spaced repetition method to help you learn quickly and remember what you learn.
Chloé, je suis heureux pour toi. Tu étais destinée à être sa femme. À votre santé.
Babbel, real language lessons for real-world conversations. Go to babbel.com now to start speaking in as little as 3 weeks.
Welcome back to today's programme here on BBC World News. Our main headlines: Ukrainian forces defend as Russia tries to take the town of Soledar in the east of the country. Relentless shelling has already obliterated much of the strategically important town. And warnings of floods and high winds as more severe weather has hit parts of California, with the 5-year-old missing after being swept away by floodwaters. Now let's turn to Iran, and the daughter of a former Iranian president has been sentenced to 5 years in prison. Fahzeh Hashemi was charged last year with propaganda against the system. Meanwhile, the UN has accused Iran of weaponising the death penalty to strike fear into the population and stamp out dissent. Well, a little earlier I spoke to my colleague at BBC Persian, Shirvas Ardalan. He told me more about that sentence, first of all, of the former president's daughter.
This is the daughter of former President Hashemi Rafsanjani. Now, many non-Iranians will remember his name being associated with more moderate voices within their regime. He is now considered as a villain in the eyes of many regime hardliners because he wanted to open Iran up to the world and make it a normal state actor. He died under very suspect circumstances. His daughter, Fahzeh Hashemi, is not just carrying the mantle of his father, but she is pushing even further in questioning the very basic tenets of Iran's theocracy and allegedly Islam itself. She'd been sentenced to 5 years in jail. She was arrested 4 months ago. She can appeal this, but there are many more cases pending against her, which just shows that the regime wants to keep her under its thumb so she doesn't become another voice, especially now in the protests where they desperately need someone inside the country to become take on a leadership role.
Now, over the weekend, we saw 2 more executions, and the fear is of more executions imminently.
2 people were executed last month in a span of a few days, and then 2 people together at the break of dawn this Saturday morning. Now, these executions have had a tremendous impact in quelling the protests because people are naturally and understandably scared, with the exception of 2 ethnic provinces, which are always restive. But the government is nevertheless going ahead with 2 more executions in the coming days and several more in the days to come, despite the fact that the situation, even though people are scared, is like a tinderbox. On Saturday night, when news came out that 2 more executions are underway, people in Tehran descended on the prison where the inmates, the protesters, were being taken to be hung in public, and they managed to stop the protest. Now, we don't know whether they stopped the protest or whether the so-called legal process didn't take its course.
I want to quickly bring in the UN. I referenced it in the introduction, talking about how quickly these criminal trials are actually proceeding. Have a listen.
Criminal proceedings and the death penalty are being weaponized by the Iranian government to punish individuals participating in protests and to strike fear into the population to stamp out dissent in violation of international human rights law.
Despite all of that, the regime is simply doubling down.
All indications abound of a double down. For example, you had the police chief being replaced by a hardliner notorious for his crackdown on protesters in 2009 during the Green Movement, and his record on enforcing mandatory hijab, which incidentally now the government is also doubling down on, because you had the prosecutor general asking law enforcement, which this hardliner is in charge of, to crack down harshly on women who flout the mandatory hijab and are not wearing headscarves just to scare women off.
Let's turn from all of that to Brazil, because President Lula has met state governors to discuss how to defend democracy following the attack on government buildings by supporters of his predecessor, Jair Bolsonaro. Last night, there were pro-democracy rallies with thousands on the streets demanding those responsible for the attacks are punished. Well, Nomia Iqbal, our correspondent, gave me the latest from Brasilia.
Well, President Lula wants those people who were involved in the riots to be arrested and face the full force of the law. Let me just tell you, Matthew, about where I am exactly, just to give you a sense of what's happening here. So I'm outside the police station where those that were rioting on the day, those who were alleged to be rioting, were brought here to be detained. So it's really important to stress they were detained, not arrested. And they were brought here and questioned. You might have seen images of people on social media of people inside a facility. About 1,500 people were brought here. Now, behind me there is a bus. I'm not quite sure if you can see it, but this bus is holding some of those people that had been detained but are now being released. So obviously authorities have questioned them and let them go. We understand up to 200 people so far have been officially arrested, and they will now be taken to another police station and questioned for up to potentially 5 days, and they could then be charged. And we're talking about really serious charges, including terrorism charges, which experts have said if those charges stick, people could be facing up to 15 years in prison.
Nomia Iqbal. Now, after days of publicity, Prince Harry's autobiography has gone on sale, and it's already the UK's fastest selling non-fiction book ever. More than 400,000 copies have been sold in a day. Much of the book's content is already public after copies were mistakenly put on sale early in Spain, and of course that series of interviews from Prince Harry himself. Here's our royal correspondent, Nicholas Witchell.
Unpacked at midnight. After all the leaks, the revelations about his own life and the claims about the lives of others, the book itself, set out for display, ready for business. A royal read, a special offer at half price. The doors to this bookstore opened to discover one particularly loyal customer queuing. Advance orders have been high, and these early readers were keen.
I can't wait to read what he's got to say, and I can't wait to listen to the audio.
To leave the family and to leave their country, I want to know in his words, why?
The book has gone on sale in countries around the world. Here it is in Singapore. And this is the French edition, on sale in Paris. The biggest demand is expected to be in the United States. There, the queue to buy was a little larger.
I know you.
And like London, the first to buy had high hopes for the book.
We find them fascinating. We find their marriage fascinating, their love story, and I just think this is going to be a great addition to the next chapter of their story.
I'm a psychologist, so I'm more interested in the sort of family dynamics, despite the obvious wealth and whatnot, the drama, trauma, loss, tragedy.
And here, in many different languages, is one man's version of those difficulties. The book, the audiobook, are out there now. Anyone who's so inclined can read or listen to them and make up their own mind. But where does this leave the monarchy and the royal family? Well, first of all, it's important to distinguish between the two. The system of constitutional monarchy has been part of this country for centuries, and it's weathered any number of ups and downs. Right now, of course, there's a new monarch, Charles III. Harry's claims, particularly against Camilla, the Queen Consort, have been wounding, but do they matter?
This is a series of revelations that have really re-entrenched both sides. Those who are great supporters of the monarchy will continue to be so. The fans of the Sussexes will feel as supportive of them as they always have been. But really, for the institution in the middle, it just carries on. It's seen far worse than this before. I mean, this might be a scandal, but it's not a crisis.
And as for the book at the centre of it all, it's already the fastest-selling non-fiction book in the UK the publishers have ever known. Nicholas Witchell, BBC News.
Now, one more story, because he's driven buses in the West Midlands in the UK for more than a decade, and he loves singing, which is why 59-year-old Ranjit Singh decided to make a music video about his job, featuring many of his colleagues. Here's Navtej Johal.
Meet Mr. Singh, the singing sensation. There probably aren't many bus drivers who would choose to write an ode to their job and then hire a video production company to turn it into this slick music video. But as you're about to learn, Ranjit Singh really loves driving buses. So what better location to chat to him than in his happy place? The 59-year-old grandfather from West Bromwich is more comfortable speaking Punjabi, his mother tongue.
Thank you.
I started by asking him why he wanted to make the video.
It's always been my dream to make a music video about my job, so that when I retire I can watch it back as a memento and reflect on how me and my colleagues all used to drive buses together.
The music video, performed in Punjabi and featuring his colleagues, took a week to film and has received plenty of attention on social media and in his home village in India.
It's made me very happy and proud. I've received lots of comments and messages and everyone's really liked it.
I'm just getting messages from my friends saying, Jack, your father-in-law's on TV. And, you know, Jack, your father-in-law's on TikTok. I'm like, whoa, I don't have TikTok, you know, so I'm just getting all these messages from everybody else saying, you know, you've seen your father-in-law singing a song about buses. I'm like, yeah, that's him, he's doing his thing.
The song celebrates the diversity of his colleagues, his passion for the job, and the importance of health and safety.
If you put your heart into your work, then you can achieve great happiness. I like it. I like driving too. There's a lot of joy in this job.
His enthusiasm is so infectious that in just a few minutes, he was able to gather a group of colleagues to give our report a suitably musical ending. Navtej Johal, BBC News, West Bromwich.
Great stuff. That brings us to the end of our programme. Thanks so much for watching. Hopefully, I'll see you at the same time tomorrow. Bye for now.